Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Niet Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Niet, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover all the home teams, Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans. We'll talk about the River Bell Classic, all on the program. We've got a great panel for you today. Ricardo Lecompte of WLAE-TV Sports and Christopher Dodson of Pelican Scoop are on the panel today. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here on a very chilly, bone-chilly New Orleans day, right? And Ricardo was just saying by Thanksgiving we'll be walking around in shorts again.
Isn't that like Louisiana? It's like, if you don't like the weather, just wait a couple of days and all of a sudden it's like, all right, 78. That's why everyone gets sick.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. No doubt. Well, welcome back. It's been a while since you've been on, but welcome back to the show. Tell the folks about everything that's going on over Channel 4 television.
Well, of course, we're right in the middle of football season, so a lot going on. We have not only prep, which we do our Fourth Down Friday show at 10:15 on Fridays, which we are in the middle of the playoffs right now, second week. So we go about 15 minutes, cover as much high school football as we can, all highlights and scores as well. And then Fourth Down on 4 on Sunday nights, 10:35. And we break down everything from Saints, even though it hasn't been the best season for the black and gold, Pelicans, college football, prep football, you name it. It's always a busy time around this, especially when we're in, again, prep football playoffs near the middle of the season for the Saints and then the Pelicans picking up the season. So, yeah, a bunch of stuff that we've got going on.
Well, welcome back. And again, you're writing for Pelican Scoop, which is a really nice website to get all your Pelicans information. Tell us about it.
Yeah, over at Sports Illustrated, Pelican Scoop, trying to do everything with the team, traveling with the team, went up to Brooklyn. We're really branching out to try and cover the team more because look at what the Pelicans are doing. They deserve the coverage. They deserve the local coverage. So we try and give it that local flavor so it's not just all national media that you hear about in New Orleans.
There you go. Welcome back to the show.
Appreciate it.
Guys, well, let's start I want to start real quick with the River Bell Classic tonight, Southeastern Nichols. That's always a big game. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Southeastern's kind of finding their niche right now. I mean, they've, ever since that loss to Texas A&M Commerce at home, I think they've kind of found their footing. And big stakes for them tonight. If they beat Nichols, not only will they win the Lone Star Conference Championship, but get that automatic bid into the FCS playoffs. And again, I think when we saw them in that Commerce loss, it was kind of like, all right, maybe this isn't the season for Frank's Cell Phone Company. Maybe it may be a step back, but it looks like they've kind of righted the ship. And I really think Cephas Johnson, the quarterback's been playing really well for the Lions, kind of, doing enough to win. and not only just with his arm, but he's also very dangerous with his legs as well.
Yes.
Their running game with Carlos Washington as well has been picking up as well. So it'll be a very fascinating. Nichols as well has been playing. They haven't had the best season as well, but when you get into these rivalry games, anything can happen. Even look at last year's game in Hammond. Southeastern came in there as the favorites, and here comes Nichols in a rivalry game behind Colin Guggenheim. He runs for three touchdowns, and they're able to get a victory. Anything can happen in this kind of game there, and especially they're playing in Thibodeau this year. But I do like how Southeastern is playing. I expect them to win, but again, you don't know how these rivalry games ever shake out.
Throw out the records, right? I mean, for this, any type of a rivalry like this one.
Right, especially you just brought up the weather. This is perfect college football weather. This is perfect college football rivalry for South Louisiana.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And again, it's gotten bigger and bigger each and every year, no doubt. Saints 3-7, and of course struggling 20-10 loss to the Steelers. The injuries have just destroyed this team again. But again, injuries are not an excuse. It is what it is. The issue again outside of that is again, what really seems like not a real buy-in to the coaching staff this year. Again, based on what we saw, last year, what we expected to see this season. On offense, they've struggled as far as, again, the offensive line, which is really injured now. We thought there might have been a quarterback change this week, but there wasn't. Are you surprised that Andy Dalton gets the start this week over Jameis Winston, or again, maybe as a dark horse, Taysom Hill?
Yeah, I was surprised when Dennis Allen said, hey, we're sticking with Andy Dalton at quarterback. And the reason why Dennis Allen kept Andy Dalton at quarterback, he said, as long as the offense is running efficiently, then we're staying with him. Well, these last 2 games, the offense hasn't been running efficiently. Right. The last 2 games, I think this offense, total yards, 215 yards they've averaged, scored 13 and 10 points, 2 touchdowns, 3 turnovers for the Saints in these last 2 games on offense. The offense hasn't been running well. So naturally, you would think, all right, well, now that Dalton and the offense have kind of hit this little snag, maybe you go back to Jameis Winston. And I know he's not 100%, but at this point, you need a spark there at offense. You need somebody to at least be a playmaker, because we know Andy Dalton as a quarterback is limited. I mean, we've seen this in Cincinnati. We've seen this in Dallas. We saw this in Chicago when he was starting last year. You've got a ceiling to Andy Dalton. And I think we've reached that ceiling. Right. So why not go with this? You're at 3-7. You need some type of spark. You're crazily still in the NFC South. Right? You're only 2 games back of Tampa. Why not make that change at quarterback? And it was funny because when we were asking Dennis Allen, is it because Jameis Winston isn't healthy? Is it because you saw something in the offense that Andy Dalton? He didn't want to go into specifics of why, but he just wanted to say, hey, this was my decision. So it's almost like he's just riding with Dalton and going, hey, I'm going down with the ship. This is my guy. This is my choice. Right. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think you're doing that to the detriment of the team and the detriment to this offense, not changing quarterbacks at this time.
I agree. I think that you knew there was going to be an expiration date on Andy Dalton based on, again, what we've seen in other cities. Defense have now adjusted to what the Saints are doing. They definitely need a spark at this point. So it's going to be, again, look, I understand the offensive line right now is injured, but Dalton's not a guy that's mobile. Jameis can be if he wants to be. We saw earlier that last season. That's why some people were calling for Taysom. What are your thoughts? I mean, should he have stayed with Dalton here, or again for the spark, as Ricardo said, try to get something going with maybe a new quarterback?
Well, I think it makes sense if you look at Dennis Allen's culture. This isn't the same culture as Sean Payton, and that was accountability utmost, no matter what. Dennis Allen, I think this is almost professional courtesy to Andy Dalton, in that you've got one more chance to be a starter in this league. This is your last game as a starter unless you do well. If this is a 3-game continuation of what's been going on, fine, you can now look at your season as kind of lost, not so to speak, and then put Winston in. A little less pressure. You could still win a division, but he doesn't have to go out there and save the season, and you really find out what you have in him, or if you're really going to have to blow this thing up from scratch.
Right. What's interesting is, again, if you got one more loss, you're pretty much, I don't know how you climb back into this thing, even, again, as bad as the NFC South is.
Yeah, this is it. And I think we even said that with Pittsburgh last week. It was kind of like, they didn't win this. Like, you're really taking a step back. Like, where do you go from here? And even to your point with the injuries, if you're having problems on the offensive line, why not start a Taysom Hill?
Exactly.
Like somebody who can be mobile, who can get away if you've got problems up front, or maybe make it easier for those offensive linemen by running more and running those kind of draws. Even though personally, I'm always like, keep Taysom Hill in what he does best, which is that Swiss Army knife role, which is the multiple roles. But at this point, and people in the locker room in the Saints, they're not punting on the season yet,
Right.
and naturally as a competitor they're not going to. But at one point, especially if they lose to the Rams, that's when you've got to start making
Right.
long-term decisions of what you want to do with this team. And yes, I actually do agree. I think it is kind of in a blow-up mode where it's like, all right, this was Sean Payton's culture, this was Sean Payton's guys, these were Sean Payton's structure of how you're doing this. Well, now you've seen how the Saints run without Sean Payton at the helm.
Right.
And if he's not there, then you've got to find a different direction to have this franchise going. And this is in terms of personnel, this is in terms of coaching, maybe in terms of what the front office looks like. But yeah, if they don't win Sunday, I don't see how they can not only climb back into this race, but I honestly think the season is pretty much done for them.
It does help that the next 4 games are all NFC. They're either rivals in the West, they're in the South. Taysom Hill, though, it would send the wrong message, again, professional courtesy to Dalton. It would send the wrong message to the team to bring in Hill after you've had him not be in the quarterback room all year. Throw some gadget plays, yeah, maybe 30% runs with Taysom Hill, but still let there be a quarterback out there so the team sees that we're going to try and hold this thing together as we're going now.
And I would say to that point, then go with Jameis Winston, if that's the point. Like, why stick with, I mean, he's 2-5 as a starter.
Why ride or die with Dalton?
They're struggling right now. Even though it's a professional courtesy, what about professional courtesy for Jameis Winston, who was the original starter? And I'm always big on a guy not losing his job because of injury.
Yes.
And it wasn't because of performance. It was because he had to deal with those back fractures. So if he's healthy enough to play, does he, should he get back in the saddle? I believe he should.
And then the message, I mean, I go back to, look, you were at training camp. You saw this team. This team, again, was expected to be one of the better teams in the NFC, possibly challenged for the NFC South. It's done anything but. There just doesn't seem to be the buy-in that we thought we were going to see with, again, the continuity. Maybe that's because of the Gardner-Johnson trade. Maybe, again, not going back to Jameis at some point when he's healthy. I don't know what the inner workings of what's going on in terms of that locker room. But this is not the same team as we've seen in the past under Payton.
Yeah, and the telling thing was yesterday when the first thing Dennis Allen said that they were working on at practice was going back to fundamentals. You're 10 games into the season.
Week 10.
If you're working on fundamentals this late in the season, you've got issues.
Yes.
And we've talked about this throughout the year when we've seen accountability. And it's when we've heard from players saying, yes, things are happening in practice and no one's speaking up about that. And it's like, wait a minute, if you're a veteran-laden team, you've got players that are getting on other players going, hey, we're not making these mistakes in practice, which carry over into the game.
Yes.
Who's holding them accountable? And it doesn't sound like the coaching staff has done it. We haven't seen the veterans, maybe doing that. And that's what's more disturbing is the fact that they have all this talent. We applauded them preseason, looking on paper. This team can not only challenge for the NFC South, but be a possible Super Bowl contender. But when you're hearing these things over and over, when you're hearing Dennis Allen saying, hey, we're working on fundamentals in our first week prepping for the Rams, then you have issues. And these issues have started since the beginning of the season.
Right. There's a lot of the same individuals, but it's not the same identity. This the team doesn't have it. That's why you go back to fundamentals in week 10, week 11. You just don't have that identity.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of it is, again, want to. I mean, again, tackling is about wanting to. And again, that's been a big issue for this team with all the missed tackles. Again, the attention to detail with the penalties and the turnovers, again, are major issues. Not getting the ball to the playmakers. I mean, once again, seems that Carmichael gets lost in the game plan during the game, not adjusting on the fly and not getting the ball to Kamara, Taysom, and Olave. Now with Landry back, it gives him another weapon. That is mind-blowing, honestly.
Yeah, and we've talked, I think, week after week when we've asked Pete Carmichael, why hasn't Taysom Hill gotten the ball enough? Why is Alvin Kamara's touches being limited? And it's one of those where he does put the onus on himself, saying, that's my fault. Maybe I've gotten lost in terms of the play calling in the midst of a game, not making sure that I'm utilizing my playmakers to the best of their ability. And it's kind of like, all right, well, it's the same message each week that you're forgetting about these guys. And part of me, it's like, does Pete Carmichael actually want to be a part of this? Because remember, it took him. They were going to look for another offensive coordinator. They had to convince him to come back and do that. It's almost like, all right, it was almost like a professional courtesy in a sense going, yeah, I'll do this year, but I don't know if his heart is truly into that. And that's a conversation that I haven't talked to Pete directly about that, but it kind of makes you wonder going, week after week, it's the same issues. Why aren't the playmakers getting the ball? And even Andy Dalton was asked about that yesterday, and he's like, ideally, we'd love to give Alvin Kamara 30 touches and making sure that he's involved in the pass game, but it simply just hasn't happened, and maybe that is part of game plan, the reason why it hasn't.
Right, and it's the season of the comeback for the running game. I think they're averaging more run yards per attempt than the last 6-7 years. Why do we need to put Alvin Kamara in so many screens? Let him and Hill run 30, 40 times a game. We've seen teams win with, the Tennessee Titans won with 6 completions. Why not try that?
Yeah. Last week, 29 yards rushing. Kamara had 8 carries for 26 yards. Taysom had 3 carries for 1 yard. I mean, again, you're just not getting the ball to your playmakers, and that's part of the issue. In the passing game, there were 4 targets for Kamara. He had caught 3 of them for 19 yards. Taysom was not targeted in the passing game at all. Again, he is forgetting about his weapons at a time when you need your weapons more than anything, and then that's the frustrating part of it all. Defensively, one of the more surprising things that has happened is, again, the play of Tyrann Mathieu. Again, who was supposed to be a guy that was not only going to be a leader, but a guy that, again, would maybe be, again, as far that safety goes, that stopgap, not tackling well, not putting it all on him. But the defense on all 3 levels is struggling when it comes to tackling.
Yeah, and to that Tyrann Mathieu point, when you've had so many lineup changes in the secondary because of injuries, I don't think you were able to maximize what Tyrann Mathieu does best. And I think we see it as a guy who, plays that robber, the guy who can make plays and kind of roam.
Doubt.
But when you don't have your number 1 shutdown corner on one side, when you have your safety, Marcus May, the other guy who's supposed to be lining up with him, in and out of the lineup because of injuries, it does get to a certain point where he can't do what he does best because whether it's I don't trust the guys that I have next to me, or the fact that we can't specifically run certain things because we don't have the right guys to run those things. That's kind of where Tyrann Mathieu probably hasn't been the big playmaker that we expected to see when he was with Kansas City those past 3 seasons. And that's at one point when you've talked about the injuries, and we never want to use it as an excuse,
but it is
reality. A big reason why this Saints team, and particularly the secondary, struggled because they haven't had most of their guys. They haven't had their full complementary set because of it.
Sure, no doubt. And of course, look, when you look at the situation, I agree with you. He should be playing a robber type position. They are having issues in the secondary, but again, it starts up front. They haven't been able to stop the run consistently, and of course, not getting a true pass rush. Now, again, they've had some games where they've broken out and gotten sacks, but not getting a consistent pass rush as well. A lot of that starts up front.
Right, and you mentioned tackling. I think a lot of that with just stopping the run, getting that tackle where Tyrann can come down and play that robber. Even if they just make contact, he can clean it up. He's not even getting a chance to clean it up. Some of the defensive line is just not getting there. They're not even eating the space. The linebackers can't get there to make that first hit. And now you've got people running free into a secondary that half of them are playing zone, half of them are playing man.
Right. It's a huge game this week. Both teams are struggling, both the Rams and the Saints. Look, I can tell you right now, just from, again, people that I know, season ticket holders, a lot of the fans are checking out. Again, so people are getting tickets that are, they're putting the tickets on StubHub, they're selling off their tickets. That's not a good thing when you're talking about, again, going into week 11 with this team. There seems to be a loss of confidence in Dennis Allen from the fans, a loss of confidence in, again, the front office from the fans. What do you anticipate happening? Now, look, a lot of people believe that the Dennis Allen should be fired and the entire staff, front office, start fresh. A lot also, when you look at the history of the Bensons and their loyalty, there's a school of thought to say that there may be changes within the coaching staff, but Dennis Allen will be back, and so will Mickey Loomis. What do you think happens?
I know this organization has patience with a lot of their guys, so I don't anticipate Dennis Allen getting fired unless this season goes off the rails. And by mean going off the rails is that they may win one game. They finish 4-13 or like that. Something where it just looks bad, where he's lost the locker room completely, and it just looks like almost like a dumpster fire.
Does it feel like that he's lost the locker room? You're in there.
It doesn't, because I can tell that they feel like they can still turn it around. And again, when you're 2 games out of the division, as a competitor, you feel like if we just start stacking wins, we have a chance. So I don't think he hasn't lost confidence in that locker room yet. But I think if this thing does go off the rails, Dennis Allen doesn't return. Now, I think he does somehow turn this thing around, because I can't foresee this thing getting worse. I mean, as much as we've seen them struggle, the Rams are even in a different category where they should beat the Rams on Sunday. But if it does get bad, then you've got to get rid of Dennis Allen, and then you have to start looking at, all right, what do we do with this roster?
Right.
What do we do moving forward? We've got to worry about all this dead money that we've got in the coming years. We've got to realize that we don't have draft picks in the net. We don't have a first round. Like despite having a bad year, we're not going to pick high because that's going to the Eagles. So if you're going to fire him, the guy you bring in, you're going to have the expectation that this is going to be a 4 or 5 year turnaround, and you're going to have patience with that that guy that comes in, probably a younger guy, and give him the rope that he needs, because it's going to look bad for a few years. If you feel like Dennis Allen, and this is probably the telling thing, if he is able to get this team still in contention by week 16, week 17, then you feel better probably as an organization going, okay, we've got our guy. We know we've got things we've got to fix roster-wise and what we're doing down the field, but at least we've got our guy because he never lost that locker room the entire year. Then you feel better about that. But again, if this thing goes off the rails, I don't expect him to come back. But I feel like it won't, and he'll be back for next season.
Right. The thing I want to see from Dennis Allen the most is a little bit of creativity and a little bit of change. He looks like the same coach from his last gig. You've got to learn what failed, and it doesn't look like he learned what failed on that first stint, and now he's bringing that same process to the Saints, and you're getting the same results. I think they have to win 3 out of the next 4, or the season's going to be lost. Yeah, he'll come back if they win at least 3 games the rest of the season. But 1 or 2 wins, you've got to start looking at younger candidates, maybe give some more of the minority candidates, a chance that have been on the staff, raise them, elevate them, maybe not clean house, but still find a way to get a new voice in here, because it's kind of got stale.
If he's retained, then at that point, continuity did not work. You have to give him an opportunity to bring in his own staff. People that again, he feels comfortable. Not Peyton's guys. Peyton was such an intense guy and a master motivator. And we're not seeing, Allen's not that guy. We're seeing on the sideline, he's stoic. He's not that guy. So again, you got to figure out again, if you're going to keep him, allow him to bring a staff in. It would be if it was me, again, I would start fresh. But again, I'm not calling the shots there. The other part of this is Mickey Loomis. You look at Loomis again. He had a stint with Jim Haslett that again was a failure. Obviously, again, give kudos to finding a guy like Sean Payton. And look, the success that they've had for all those years under Payton. But the question also begs is he the guy to rebuild this franchise if ultimately either they stay with Allen or they move on to another coach?
I feel like he's got the track record, so it almost feels like he can do it. I would say in this sense that you've already seen the experiment of Sean Payton and his culture. You take him out of that.
Right.
And you're like, all right, so we retain DA because we're keeping everything status quo. Well, now we've learned that it doesn't work without Sean Payton in there. Okay, so that's all right. So if you do retain Dennis Allen, one, I agree with you. Make sure that you get his guys on his staff, that are his guys.
Right.
Get him in there. And I think, two, when you look at this roster and what he has to do with this, yeah, he's going to have dead money, but it's also like, all right, if Sean Payton does come back, you do get a first rounder if you can
at least one.
You figure that out. And then you have to decide, all right, most of those veterans on that roster, you're going to have to trade them.
Exactly.
Like you've got to clean house in that.
The stars are gone.
The stars, and you're going to have to. Now you have some young pieces, and I always say, even though they don't have that first round of the Eagles, look what they got in return for that. You ended up with Chris Olave and Trevor Penning in the first round. Those are 2 guys that I think you can build around. You have a left tackle and you've got a playmaker at wide receiver. You've got to figure out that quarterback situation. I still think it goes back to that.
I agree.
And is it going to have to be, I don't know if you can look in the draft, it's going to have to be free agency. And remember, Loomis did hit with that, finding Drew Brees many moons ago. So he's got to hopefully find that same magic in free agency, because that's the only way you can kind of sustain and keep this. But Loomis thought at this point, we could still win with this roster. I think it's getting to the point where you're going to have to just now suck up the fact that this run is done. It was a great run. This 17 to now has been a great run. But I think you've got to kind of start over. But I think he can do it if those things kind of fall into place.
It will be a sell-off. And anybody that doesn't realize that, you better realize it quick. When you look at all the dead money, they're going to have to get rid of the stars. They'll spread that dead money over 2 years, and they're going to acquire draft picks, and that's because they need cheap labor going forward. That's the way that's going to have to rebuild this team. Your thoughts? Loomis is over the basketball team, the football team. Should they kick him even to a higher position, where he's not day-to-day with the football team? Or again, should he get an opportunity to rebuild this franchise?
I think he should get an opportunity to rebuild this franchise, and I also don't think there will be any dead money years where this team can't compete like, say, the Houston Texans, because look at Atlanta. They got $70 million in dead money. They could win a division. Look at the division going forward. Carolina doesn't have a quarterback. Tom Brady won't be here forever. New Orleans can find someone to help them win games immediately, even while they go through some of these other growing pains, and they start a new era. There doesn't have to be a full downturn for this franchise. There could still be some positivity, and so that's why I think he should be able to rebuild it. It's still his project.
Right.
Yeah.
Jeff Ireland, hot and cold in terms of his draft picks. Some have been really good, some not so good. We know there's been a big influence on Sean Payton and what he wanted in that room. Is he a guy that's retained, or do you think maybe again he's a guy that Sean Payton is tapping into to go ultimately where he is? Yeah,
that could be an option there. But you also remember in that front office you got Kai Hartley there too, who's a very good. He's the next rising star in the front office. That if Ireland ends up getting scooped up or whatever, maybe that's a guy that gets promoted into that role as well. There's a lot of personnel kind of things that you're looking at, and we were talking about the drafts, and just even looking back at the Saints, man, were they building so much off that 2017 draft class, which is probably one of the best draft classes that we've seen the Saints ever have. But then when you follow up the next 3 years, this is probably the reason why we're in this position right now, because the following year you traded up to get Marcus Davenport, and that hasn't really panned out. Right. Then the following year draft, you ended up not having a first-round pick. You ended up getting your starting center, which was Eric McCoy. And then you have C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's no longer on the team because he's been traded to the Eagles. And so, like, you ended up, and then the next draft, you ended up with Cesar Ruiz, that was drafted in the first round. So you ended up with one starter, one guy who could potentially get a big payday that's no longer
for two picks.
Yeah. So that's where the last few years you've just been like, okay, what are the Saints doing in terms of that? They've been building on that 17 draft for so long. We've got to see now moving forward, all right, where's your creativity in terms of where's that talent scouting that you're seeing? You've got to hit on these next two drafts. And as much as handcuffed as you are, you've got to figure out a way to hit on these next couple drafts.
I mean, other franchises have pulled it off, so it would be an indictment on Mickey Loomis if he does get the chance and can't. This, sort of like Andy Dalton, this is your last chance to mess up. If you get it right, you get a longer runway. But if you mess this one up, it's time to let somebody else fly the plane. Saints
have a second, third, fourth round pick. They have one fifth-round pick that was traded to Philly in the Olave deal. They have a sixth-round pick, no seventh-round pick. That's what they have this year in terms of draft capital. We'll see how it goes. Again, their first-round pick belongs to Philadelphia. If ultimately they continue on a downward slide, that's going to be a top-5 pick. That means that's going to be a top-5 pick in the second, third, fourth, fifth round. So again, you have that to maybe look forward to, even without that first-round pick. And then, of course, the hope is, at least for the fan base, Sean Payton goes back into the league, and you get not so much players, but you get a plethora of picks, not just first-round picks, first, second, thirds. You get a bunch of picks that, again, you can augment the loss of that first-round pick this year.
Yeah, and I'm still eyeing the situation with the LA Chargers.
Yes.
I think that's the ideal situation for the Saints.
And for Payton, right?
Yeah, for Payton as well, because again, if the Chargers don't make the playoffs, I think they get rid of Staley. I think that the coaching change happens, and that would be an ideal spot for Sean Payton to land. He's got a team, a talented roster. He's got a quarterback in Justin Herbert that he can mold into his own, and he's in LA. And that's ideally where he wants to end up being. That would be the pick, and they've got a first rounder that the Saints can get. I think look at that Charger situation down the road, and that's kind of, if you want something to root for, you got to hope for the Chargers not to make the playoffs, so they make the change.
And it's LA.
Yeah, and it's LA.
And it's LA, which we know he wants to get to a big market as well. YouTube watcher right now, viewer wants to know, do you think they go after a quarterback in the draft like a Hendon Hooker?
No, I think if Payton comes in and they goes to the Chargers, why not take, if that's only one pick, trade down. Try and accumulate more picks. The quarterback you want won't be there, so let's build something else, build up the lines again, and look for that quarterback maybe next year when maybe Jaden Daniels is in the draft, and it's a little bit stronger in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the Hendon Hooker. I really like what he's got. Maybe that is a possibility you look at there, but I think I'm kind of in your boat as well. I think it is draft capital accumulation at this point.
Yes.
If you get to that point, just trade down, and you've got to rebuild a lot more on this roster than the quarterbacks. I think if we're going to see the Saints go after a new quarterback, it's going to be in the free agency pool, and wherever that is, they're going to have to. That's how they're going to fill that in terms instead of looking to draft, especially this draft.
They do have Jameis under contract for one more year. Okay, if they wanted to go there, but it doesn't seem that Allen has much confidence in Jameis right now. Otherwise, I think he would be going to him this week.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes. Big weekend this weekend for the Saints, though. To get to keep the fan base involved, and also to stay within the NFC South race. We'll see how it works out. All right, we'll take a break. We come back. We'll jump into the collegiate game. We'll talk about the LSU Tigers, the Tulane Green Wave. Also, we'll get into the Pelicans as well. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Ricardo Lecompte of Channel 4 Sports, and also Christopher Dodson of Pelican Scoop, our guest tonight. Don't go anywhere.
Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family owned and operated since 1989. Burkhardt has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhardt's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhardt's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Ricardo Lecompte and also Christopher Dodson are on our panel tonight. Guys, Tigers 8-2, 6-1 on the SEC West champs. I'm blown away. Okay, 13.
Were you surprised our SEC West?
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. 13-10 winners over Arkansas on Saturday, and of course they're 6th in the college football playoff poll and the AP poll, 7th in the coaches poll. I'll go to you first, Ricardo. I knew he was going to be a foundation builder. I said that when they hired him, he's the closest thing to Nick Saban that they've had in terms of a coach. 39 scholarship players starting with, all the defections, going in the transfer portal, that 2022 class, and a miraculous turnaround for this program. It's mind-blowing because of how quickly the fortunes of the Tigers have changed.
I think it's an indictment on how good of a coach Brian Kelly is. And I don't think anyone ever doubted that. I think it's just a matter of, hey, let's put him in the SEC. Let's see what he can do. But the fact that, again, you were talking about 39 scholarship players, trying to rebuild this from scratch. And the fact that if you looked at this team, what it looked like against Florida State in the opener, and maybe even if you go to the Tennessee game, and now have you seen the steps that they have done? I mean, that is Brian Kelly's fingerprints on that in terms of getting that team ready to play, in terms of getting them to feel like they are in contention now. And we were talking about, hey, what would be a great season for LSU? 7-8 wins. And now they're going to play for an SEC championship game against Georgia and have a possibility of getting into the college football playoff. I think we just learned that Brian Kelly is a fantastic coach, and when he starts getting these guys in these next couple of draft cycles, in the next couple of recruiting cycles, this is going to be a very scary, dangerous, very good team.
I would agree. 39 scholarship players, 12 players from the transfer portal, 15 signees in the 2022 class, and was able to build on that very, very quickly.
Right, and you look at that Florida State game, it looked like a soft open of a kitchen. New Orleans can appreciate that. They went in there and he was a chef that went and got it right immediately. And now nobody's crying. There's got no hurt bellies. You got Brian Kelly leading it to flip it. And he's in the SEC. They always said it'd be a tough thing, but you also give him SEC talent. The transport portal treated him very well. And now we see what this team can be going forward. Even if they just win the SEC title and don't really shake out in the football playoff,
right,
it's still a great season for LSU.
Considering where they were to where they are now, I mean, it's amazing. When you look at this team now and how they perform from week to week, first of all, a tremendous amount of credit has to go to the coaching staff. The ability to be able to figure out what players do well, and then to put them in a position to be to perform. But also going back, and you were there, going back to again before camp. And the accountability that he put on his players to make them accountable for each other, I think, and the discipline also within the program has changed, and I think that's a big reason why we're seeing why they are now.
I remember going up to a preseason camp and talking to a few people outside the LSU, and I was just like, "How's Brian Kelly as a guy?" And he's like, "He's fine," but they all told me you can tell a considerable difference of how things are ran versus how Ed Ogeron was running things. And there was an accountability, just a sense of everything just felt like it was structured, we know what we're doing, we know where we're going. And the fact that you just bring that at a preseason camp on your very first time when you've got guys that, you're starting over basically, and you're like, all right, what are we gonna do here? The fact that they all bought in from the beginning,
yes,
and just the whole system of how everything he ran it just felt like they are gonna go into a direction that it doesn't feel lost. You feel like, all right, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. If we follow you, if we listen to you and we kind of do this, we can get to whatever our goal is.
Yes.
And again, their goals are now expanding because it didn't look like this was going to be a team that could potentially win an SEC championship. And again, it is kudos to what Brian Kelly and the staff has done. And one of the things when you talked about the players and knowing how to get the right guys in, the conversations, I think the last few weeks with him and Matt House of how do we get B.J. Ojulari and Harold Perkins on the field at the same time?
Right.
And the fact that you were able to figure that out, and you're seeing Harold Perkins light it up as a freshman, defensively, and he's getting after the quarterback, and he's running down track stars like Arkansas.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, the fact that they're able to make those adjustments and they know what they're doing with their personnel, it bodes well to what they're doing in terms of the plan. It bodes well that they're able to adjust. It just bodes well to everything, seeing that this is the kind of functionality we need if you're moving forward for LSU versus, Ed Ogeron got to the pinnacle, got to the mountaintop with the players. He won as, I'm the Louisiana boy that wins with the Louisiana school. But after that, it was kind of like, all right, so what's the future? Where are we moving? Where's the structure? It felt a lot different that preseason camp. And I'm almost, when you kind of think about how it started at the beginning, it's like, okay, I can see why they're at this point now.
Yeah, and I mean, so different, right? Then why don't you make your point, and then I'll
you hit on it. Structure is what was lacking. I mean,
absolutely.
Ogeron had the swagger and all that after he went, but the structure, when it falls apart, so did the standards, and we saw that. And this college kids, especially the football players, they need that routine.
Yeah.
And Brian Kelly's come in there and really gave them the structure to succeed. The players have seen that. They saw he cared where that wasn't really his reputation coming in. He was just going to come in and try and do what he could. And once they saw that, they've really taken to his style of coaching. And now the standard has reached LSU's standard of winning the SEC.
To both of your points, you have to go back to Nick Saban for structure and discipline. Les Miles didn't have it. Ogeron didn't have it. Now, both were able to win national championships because of the plethora of talent that they had. But again, structure and discipline. This is something that and you can see. Look at LSU. Look at Alabama and Saban. You get longevity when you build a program like that. To your point about Harold Perkins, let's just talk about Arkansas. 8 total tackles, 6 solo, 4 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, 1 quarterback get, one pass defense, 2 forced fumbles. He looked like the second coming of Lawrence Taylor out there. I mean, I saw a move where he does the bend to be able to again do the chop on the quarterback and forcing the fumble. They, of course, did it twice. Once was not called a fumble. The other one an incomplete pass. Reminded me of Ricky Jackson and also Lawrence Taylor. Those are what those guys were doing. Both those guys are in the NFL Hall of Fame. This guy's a freshman at LSU.
What's scary is he doesn't know what he's doing right now. He's just working basing on pure talent, running down guys, just being a disruptive force. when he realizes what to do in the structure of a defense and actually know where to be and he's moving at that same speed.
Right.
I'm looking at Harold Perkins and going, this dude is easily playing on Sundays. And again, this is one of those like good gets that they figured out.
It was a last-minute deal too, right? He was an A&M commit.
And they were able to flip. And the fact that they were able, as a coaching staff, to figure out how do we get him on the field, because he wasn't playing early on. But how to get him structured, how to get him paired with Ojulari, how to get him just in a position where he's our best athlete on defense, let him run free, let him, that does go back to coaching and figuring out how to utilize your players in the best way possible. And that's Brian Kelly. That's things that you see that go, all right, this can be sustainable over time because we have the right guy, we have the structure in place. But and it just shows for Harold Perkins, for example, being able to find how to harness that talent and then be able to put it on the football field and make him play to the best of his ability.
So, go ahead.
Right, and on that play you're talking about, he literally got around the edge, was down. He could have just untied the shoelaces of that offensive lineman. They put the dime down, pick it up.
The bend.
And I haven't seen a defensive stand like that in any sport until you go back to like Anthony Davis in Kentucky when he didn't score a point in that national championship game, but he dominated on the defensive end. Perkins won that game on the defensive end.
Well, he did.
LSU didn't score.
I mean, someone talking about him being, look, LSU has some great linebackers in the history of the program. Some are already talking about he might be one of the best linebackers ever. Okay, and I mean, we're only talking about, again, like 10 games. And it's pretty amazing. On the flip side, Jaden Daniels has been everything that Perkins has been on the defensive side, on the offensive side. But I do want to ask this question because what happened this past weekend against Arkansas? Is that the recipe to be able to slow him down? It's the only team this year that slowed him down in terms of his ability to run, his ability to be effective in the passing game.
Yeah, and I think quick turnaround.
He was sacked 7 times.
He was, and maybe that could be a recipe. Maybe other teams could see that, but he has been playing well prior to that
Absolutely.
game. And the turning point for Jaden Daniels, he had this players only meeting where basically the players were telling him, hey, trust us, like get us the ball, trust us, and then things will kind of go within that offense, and you'll kind of find your fitting. And after that Tennessee game, he's taken off. I've seen a growth from Jaden Daniels in the sense that Florida State game, it was one read and run. So if that first read's gone, he's taken off. And now he's actually, you see a little bit of the regression. And it's also, all right, if it's not there, I'm taking off and running, but I'm going to be decisive in where I'm going and running. And you've seen more of that confidence kind of building with Jaden Daniels. Has Arkansas found something? I think it was more of like that quick turnaround. You're coming off an emotional win against Alabama. Okay. I don't know if they were quite on it. If it happens against UAB on Saturday, if they're not just clicking and they're just going on all cylinders, then maybe it's some concern. But I more so say it's just more of the game rather than Arkansas may have found something.
Early start.
Early start in the cold, all that.
8 for 15 for 86 yards, 19 rushes for 10 yards. I mean, that's just not Jaden Daniels. And of course, sacked 7 times. Arkansas again, they spied him. That front 7 was stout. It'll be interesting to see again if that is something that can carry over. Hopefully not. Your thoughts?
Now, you're going to have to confuse Georgia to beat Georgia, and that offense in Arkansas was predictable. I think it was a little vanilla. They didn't bring everything out of their bag. They just wanted to grind out a win. It was cold. It was early. It was a letdown game. The coaches knew their players and knew not to try and get too far out. But when you come to Georgia, you're going to have to. It's small margins. Like you're going to have to get a little unpredictable, cause some chaos. Because even an early timeout against Kirby Smart, that's a small win. If you can make them burn that. And LSU's going to have to win every single margin. And it's going to start with UAB.
And then also, again, the turnovers. I mean, again, if you're going to beat Georgia in Georgia for the SEC championship, they're going to have to turn the ball over. You have to create turnovers and some havoc there as well. I agree. 2 big ones you just can't overlook the next 2. UAB, again, this Saturday, and then, of course, Texas A&M. This will be their Super Bowl. They've won 1 SEC game. This is their championship. This is what they're pointing to. A lot of Louisiana kids on that roster, some ex-LSU players on that roster. That'll be one to watch in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and they still got talent. Like they're
talented.
Like the Aggies are talented. They just underperformed tremendously.
It's like the Saints.
Like
I mean, they mirror each other.
It's that same frustration.
It really is.
Wait, you have all this talent. Why are you so bad? And that's basically what we're saying. Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be their Super Bowl when they play LSU, and it is the quote unquote, I don't want to say it's the forced rivalry game that we have to have in the SEC West, but I think over the years, a lot of LSU fans, especially friends that I have LSU fans, are like, I really do not like the Aggies. I really don't like.
No, they don't like that going way back, no doubt.
But yeah, I think this is where Jimbo Fisher is going to be. He's basically going to throw the kitchen sink against LSU, and he's going to have everything he can to here's our landmark game. Let's knock off LSU. Let's get them out of the potential shot at the college football playoff. I agree. I think that's going to be their toughest test. I think UAB is nothing to sneeze at either. I know they're 5, but they're a good team.
They're not a bad team.
They've been a good program.
You got to play to beat them.
Yeah, but I don't see a letdown in either way because I think, again, when we go back to Brian Kelly and how he approached these games, he's not going to make sure it's a letdown because it's like, no, if you want to be a championship thing, and here's the structure, if you want to be a championship team, these are the weeks where you've got to come prepared. You got to, perform each week preparation-wise, so you're ready to play on Saturday. And he's preached that all season long. You saw that with Alabama. Even after Alabama, you're seeing the same things going, hey, this is a big game, but this is how we get ready for these big games. I don't expect a letdown. It's going to have to be those guys are going to have to go out and beat those.
Right. Look at the contrast on both sides. You got Jimbo Fisher, who could have been at LSU, and now you get Brian Kelly. And we hate to hear it in this day and age, but those kids in that A&M locker room are going to hear at least once, go earn your NIL money. They've already heard it all offseason. They say that's how the recruiting class come about. You know at least one person's going to drop that. And those kids, some of them will feel like they're out there trying to play for that livelihood, and you're going to get their best shot.
You never doubt 18 to 21-year-olds, especially when you're saying stuff like that. That's plenty of motivation.
And that's the other thing. Again, you want to kind of erase the bad taste of this season and try to go into next season with at least again a good feel. And beating LSU would do that. Both you guys, because I want to move to Tulane. Brian Kelly, Coach of the Year. Because the guy on Claiborne Avenue, he's got a case as well.
Yeah.
And Willie Fritz.
You can throw Willie Fritz. You can throw Brian Kelly. You can throw Mac Brown in there with UNC. They're quietly having a great season, like when they weren't supposed to. I mean, there's a lot of good things, but I still have to see a couple more weeks before I do Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I love the Mac Brown resurgent story. That just the way he's kept his legacy going. I think he'll kind of get some legacy votes, but Brian Kelly will have a good returning class. They'll have a great chance next year, and hopefully Tulane's got Willie Fritz next year too.
Well, I don't think he's going anywhere. That's where we're going next. Tulane again 8-2, 5-1 now in the American, losing to UCF last week. A lot of SEC type players, former SEC players on UCF's team. Some real, even Fritz talked about the speed. Not the sure tackling we saw throughout the season, but yet through it all, and really some bad calls. So I mean, I don't want to put this on the refs, but there were 3 calls that were really big calls that could have changed the complexion of the game. With that said. They never quit. They continued to come back all the way to the end against UCF in the 38-31 loss.
Yeah, and to that point, Tulane's been that way all year, where they haven't quit, and that's what you kind of want to see in this fight. There are some teams in the American that I think are at another level than Tulane. They're just one step above Tulane.
Right.
And I would say UCF, I'll throw Cincinnati in that category. Those are 2 teams where you go, Tulane's building into that direction. I don't think they're quite there yet in terms of being that type of team that can win not only the American but get the highest group of 5 to get into a New Year's Six bowl. But they're trending in that right direction. When I looked at that UCF game, and I was out there on that Saturday covering that, one of the things I noticed is they do have SEC speed. And John Rice Plumlee was the guy that, he was doing that against an LSU defense a few years ago when he was Ole Miss's quarterback, and he was doing the same thing against Tulane. And I know Willie Fritz said afterwards, I would have gotten my fastest player on the scout team as my quarterback if I had known it was going to be that much speed that we were going to look at. But you're right, you got to love Tulane's fight in that game. The turning point, I thought, was in the fourth quarter, where they get it within 7. And UCF drives on a 16-play drive where
8 minutes.
8-minute drive where they converted 4 third downs. They had a 4th and 1 where they had that pass interference call where it was basically looked like they jumped off sides. It was a free play, and then they interfered John Rice Plumlee as he was going out for a pass. Those are those type of winning plays where I think Tulane's going to learn from those things, where you've got to get a stop, you've got to get off the field, and you have a chance in that game. That was where I thought the turning point was, that 16-play drive in the fourth quarter.
That was also, one moment, that was also, again, the drive where the lineman was downfield, the flag was dropped, the official sitting right next to it, and they picked it up, which could have stymied that drive, and it didn't. And then they went on to continue to have that 8-minute drive. Go ahead.
Right, well, that's something where you learn as a team. And when you're looking at a team and a program, this is a great team, but the programs hadn't quite reached what they're doing. You can't let someone come into your house and go on that kind of drive when you've got everything to play for. And that's just a learning moment. Sometimes you take a punch, you got to get back up, and those kids will learn from it, and I think we'll see this program benefit from it going forward.
Right. Well, again, a lot of self-inflicted wounds on Saturday as well. 8 penalties for 83 yards, too many missed tackles, which has not been the forte of that defense, been a swarming, short tackling defense, and too many drop passes as well.
Yeah, there were a couple ones, I think, in that third quarter. There was one in the third quarter that they dropped in the end zone, and there was another one where it was a deflected pass. But there were some opportunities, and they said that offensively there were some opportunities they missed. I also thought they got away from the running game in the first half, and I think part of it was because Tyjae Spears was hurt and banged up, and they had I think it was 105 rushing yards in the first quarter, 50 yards for the rest of the game.
Right.
So there was a sense where they abandoned that run game, and I think part of that was Tyjae was banged up and they were hurt. Now they do have a stable other backs, Shade Clayton, Celestine. Iverson Celestine there.
Right,
I switched that up. But they do have those pieces where if they stick to that running game, which I think has been the biggest part of Tulane's success offensively, maybe we could tell a different story. Certainly that's what they're going to have to do tonight against SMU, and certainly when they travel to Cincinnati in that season finale.
No doubt. The Tulane again, and 21st in the college football playoff poll, 21st in the AP, 22nd in the coaches poll. They still control their own destiny here. They win the next 2 games. They're in the championship against UCF, and if they win, they're in the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, and that's a revenge game. UCF come in your house. Now you get to go ruin their season and get a payoff for the Cotton Bowl. What better could you ask for the Green Wave with this season and the bounce that they had from last year?
Right. SMU's been tough though. Beat them last 7 times. They've had their number. And of course they got a pretty good quarterback and a pretty good running back on that team.
Yeah, they're and also the receiver who's one of the leading receivers in the country as well. Yeah, and that's where I'm like, all right, here's another test for this defense. Again, if you're making these steps to be in a program that can compete not only for a conference championship, but be one of those teams that you talk about as a group of 5. These are one of these games where you just had a tough loss against UCF. Now you've got SMU that's got some really good pieces. You've got to basically defend your home turf and set up that situation where you go to Cincinnati next week playing for a passable spot in the AAC championship game. This will tell us a lot of where this program is, just in sense of, all right, are they taking the right steps? Are they getting to this point where they can be competitive against a UCF, against a Cincinnati, be that type of program, not so much a team by team, season by season, but be a sustainable program over years. These are the types of games that you have to win tonight.
Well, I want to ask you both you guys, Willie Fritz, I don't believe he's going anywhere. He's 62 years old. He's got this program in the right direction, but there may be some big programs that come calling. What do you think happens?
I think he stays, and it's a program kind of build, and I don't think his job is done yet at Tulane. I think you're coming off a 2-10 season, so now you've turned it around the right track with this year. Let's see what you can be able, because ultimately he still wants to win a conference championship and get Tulane to a place they've never been before. Get him into a New Year's Six bowl. Get him into the conversation of being one of the best group of 5 programs in the country.
Right, and with that 2-10 season, you're not going to get the contract that maybe some other ones get. The project's not done, and look at what happened to UL when Napier left. That's an empty stadium. Tulane's going to want to invest in what they're building here, and a lot of that's going to be done by, hey, we're going to keep him, we're going to pay him, we're going to just let you finish out your career here, put the statue up, hopefully, have a few banners starting this season, that sort of thing. It just writes itself.
Right, and at 62, do you really want to go start over somewhere else? That's the other part of it as well. Guys, let's just start Pelicans. They've won 3 in a row. They're 4-1 in the second 10. Well, we're going to do this by 10 games now because that's what Willie wants to do. So that's what we're going to do. Boston on Friday night, Golden State on Monday. 124-110 win last night over Chicago. That was preceded by 113-102 win over Memphis. Your thoughts on the Pels?
Look, they're starting to find their form. This team, they had a lot of vibes. They didn't have an identity. We've talked a lot about teams having an identity. They were doing great in Brooklyn. I was in Brooklyn for that game. I've been around the team. They're finally finding their footing. Zion's still knocking off some rust. CJ's still knocking off some rust. He was feeling terrible. I mean, they didn't want to say it like that, but he was under the weather for a few weeks. You're seeing him coming back. This team is top 10 in every major metric you would want to be top 10 in. So there's no reason they can't finish in the top 5 in the West, host a playoff series. Everything's in front of them. I feel great about this team.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought it was really telling last night. You're coming off the second night of the back-to-back, and it's always hard to get your guys up there. And my kind of early stars, I would say Jose Alvarado is one of the guys where I go, man, what a energy spark you have coming off the bench. And man, have the Pels got such a deal for the contract? They signed him for that extension. They're going to maximize that deal with Jose because of the way he plays. I'm also thinking Trey Murphy has been playing like stellar, and not so much just because of the way he's shooting the ball, but I think defensively he's making big strides than where he was as a rookie.
Rebounding as well.
Yeah, and you can see that he is a guy that's developing more parts of his game, and because of that, the Pelicans are benefiting from it.
He could be a better starting four, actually, by the end of the season than Zion. You put Zion at the point. Trey Murphy could be at the All-Star game in 2 years as an all-star starter, not just as a three-point and dunk contest.
The shocking thing about him is his athleticism, which I didn't think we saw last year. We saw it a little bit in the summer league, but his ability to go to the basket. We saw, again, he was a willing rebounder last year. But, again, you've seen now the confidence that has just soared with him. His ability to knock down the three-point shot, which we knew he had. But, again, willing to be able to go in and do the dirty work inside. And we talk about Zion with a quick jump. He's got an athletic quick jump.
I still think that play that we saw where he makes the block on one end and comes down and does a double clutch dunk. I was like, okay, now this kid's got something, and he's and that's a nice little. If you wrap everything up there, just seeing what he does defensively, turning into offense, showing off that athletic ability, everything was just wrapped up nicely in that one play, and you go, man, they hit on that draft pick.
And it all comes from the confidence in his shooting. If you watched last year before he went to the G League, he was hitting the side of the backboard with some of his shots. There was no confidence. It literally took inches off his vertical, if you ask me, just because he was thinking too much about it. And now he's playing. You saw him take a lead in summer league. Now he feels like a leader on this young team, and it's really starting to stand out.
Yeah, he was averaging over 28 points in those 3 games in summer league, and now he's just taking 30-footers and draining them, and you're like, okay.
And we want him to take more.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room right now, but that's Zion. Will Gilly wrote an article in The Athletic within the last week talking about his defense, lack of. We're seeing really the spark come in when Alvarado and Nance and Najee Marshall, when the second team comes in, getting back to Pelican basketball, where they're playing defense, they're giving up good shot for great shots, etc. Right now, they're still kind of feeling their way through with Zion in terms of, again, how they're going to utilize him. What's the end game here? What position do you think he ultimately is going to play for this team?
I think it's, lack of a better thing, I think it's just a winning position. So it depends if you have to, at some nights, if he has to run point forward, then you do that. If he's got to sit in the paint and bang with a big guy, then he's got to do that. If he's got to be a playmaker, if he's got to be a facilitator. So
it's by game.
I think it's going to be game by game. And that's the beauty of what this depth of this team has, that you don't have to have Zion having a 40-point, 10 rebound, 8 assist night every night. You can have BI have a big night. CJ McCollum can take the heavy load, but I think there is a point where you haven't had him healthy the entire year last year. So you're still working in terms of, all right, where does he fit? How does he kind of flow? What rotations does he kind of work in best with, the other 4 guys that he's got in there? But certainly I'd still go, Zion is still a very important person you need on the floor when it comes with crunch time. It's just a matter of trying to figure that out. And I think that will come as the season, progresses.
You got the final word.
Right, and then we get Dyson's going to grow into being the point guard. I think Zion's best position in 2 years is actually going to be putting CJ on the bench. And he will be the combo guard that can initiate, do some things, but when he gets the ball, let him bully through the paint.
Right.
Let him start trusting his game that he's doing now and hitting those 3-pointers. I think you'll actually see Zion not playing the point Zion, but combo Zion.
Wow, really?
And that will be his best spot when he gets to match up against small ball. He can go down low, but other than that, combo Zion.
Got to be healthy though. That's the big thing.
Gotta be healthy.
I know they're handling with kid gloves right now, but he's got to be healthy. Is this a top 4 team in the West?
I don't think it's a top 4, but I think they're not a play-in team either. I think they're in that 5-6 range. Right. I think they're that good but top 4. I mean, we've got some loaded teams in the West, and I don't think they're there just quite yet. But certainly a playoff team outside of the play-in, but capable of winning first-round playoff
25
teams.
seconds, all yours.
I think we get 4th seed maybe. 3rd seed would be a possibility. 5th or 6th is the lowest. We're not going to be a play-in team, but Golden State, they're looking broken. Utah's going to drop. The Kings are going to drop. The way it sorts out, it's all health.
Right.
But this team can really make a run and host a Game 7 here in New Orleans if it come down to that.
Christopher Dodson, Ricardo Lecompte, thanks so much for being with us here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Great job. All right, guys, again, as always, we very much appreciate appreciate you guys coming on down and joining us here. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a lot of rebroadcasts of our program now. We're so blessed to have so many rebroadcasts. There's a QR code on your screen right now. Click it on your phone. You either go to my website, ericasher.com, or the WLAE-TV YouTube page, and of course, set your DVR for the rebroadcast of your choice. You catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM. That's weekdays 4 to 6. You can listen live at ericasher.com. Also, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio app, or our digital platforms. Our podcast is on the Anchor app or on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside New Orleans Show with Eric Asher. I want to thank our underwriters who make this show possible. Please support our underwriters. And, of course, want to thank the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dodson, Logan Rafia, Alex Chacon, and my director, William Hill. For Ricardo Lecompte and also for Chris Dodson, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll see you next week for a Thanksgiving edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Have a good week.